In a world constantly filled with noise and distractions, we often forget that some of the most profound messages are delivered not through words, but through silence. It's in the quiet moments, when the hustle and bustle of life fades away, that we can truly hear God's voice speaking to us. Today, we'll explore the powerful revelation of silence, a space where God communicates with us in ways that go beyond our understanding. As we dive into this topic, we'll discover how silence is not an absence but a presence, an invitation from God to listen, reflect, and grow in our faith. So let's pause for a moment, embrace the stillness, and open our hearts to what God says when He speaks through the silence. In a world that never stops talking, it's easy to overlook the profound power of silence, especially when it comes to understanding God's Word. Many of us are accustomed to thinking that God speaks to us through loud voices or grand signs, but what if His most powerful messages are delivered in the stillness? Silence, in its purest form, can be one of the most significant ways God communicates with us. It's in those moments of quiet, when our minds and hearts are open and free from the noise of daily life, that we become most receptive to His voice. God often chooses to speak in ways that we don't expect. In the hustle of our busy lives, we may miss the subtle whispers of His presence. But when we make space for silence, we invite the possibility of hearing what He's been trying to tell us all along. In silence, there's no rush, no distractions, just the space to listen. It's in those moments that God can touch our hearts in ways that words never could. Silence allows us to pause and reflect, offering clarity on our purpose, our struggles, and our path forward. When we think of God's voice, we often imagine something loud and powerful, like thunder or a commanding presence. But sometimes His voice is gentle, a quiet whisper within us. This is where we need to listen closely, to pay attention to what isn't being said aloud. The power of silence doesn't mean that God is absent. Instead, it's a call to be present with Him, to engage in a deeper, more intimate conversation that transcends word. In those quiet moments, we can hear God's guidance in the form of peace, comfort, or conviction. It's a space where we can process our thoughts, where doubts can be settled, and where our hearts can be open to His divine wisdom. Silence, then, becomes a sacred space for revelation, where we can discern His will, feel His presence, and gain the strength we need to continue our journey of faith. Ultimately, silence is not a void to be filled, but a space to be experienced. It's through these silent revelations that we come to understand the depth of God's love and the beauty of His communication, which is often far quieter than we expect. The next time you find yourself in a moment of silence, remember that God may be speaking to you in ways that only your heart can understand. Listening for divine guidance is a practice that requires not only the ability to hear, but the patience to wait. In our busy lives, we often overlook the importance of quiet moments, thinking that God's guidance must come through loud, unmistakable signs. Yet, the truth is that God's voice is often subtle, asking us to listen more closely and be more patient in our search for answers. It's in those still moments of prayer, meditation, or simple, quiet reflection that God speaks most clearly, offering us the direction we need. Too often, we rush through our days seeking immediate answers, but the divine wisdom that God provides isn't always immediate. Sometimes we have to sit in the stillness, quiet our minds, and open our hearts to hear what God is saying. It's easy to fill our days with constant noise, whether it's work, social media, or even our own thoughts. It's a deep sense of peace that allows us to truly hear. Listening for divine guidance requires us to trust that God is always speaking to us, even if His voice isn't always loud or clear. In the silence, we can begin to discern His presence, guiding us in ways that may not be immediately obvious. Whether it's a sense of peace in our decision-making, a new direction in our path, or a simple knowing deep within our hearts, God's guidance can come in many forms, but we have to be quiet enough to hear it. By cultivating habits of silence, whether through prayer, meditation, or quiet moments in nature, we become more attuned to God's voice. We begin to understand that God's guidance doesn't always come with a loud command, but rather in quiet whispers that lead us toward the right path. In this silence, we also learn patience as we trust that God's timing is perfect and that His answers will come when we are ready to hear them. So, the next time you find yourself seeking direction, remember that listening for divine guidance often means waiting in the silence. It's in those moments of stillness that God can speak most clearly to us, guiding us toward the path He has planned for us. When we make space for silence, we make room for His voice to be heard. Silence is not just an absence of noise. It's a profound space where wisdom can be found. In our world, we are constantly bombarded with information, opinions, and distractions, all clamoring for our attention. Yet, in the quiet moments when we step away from the noise, we can find the wisdom that God is trying to impart to us. It's in these times of silence that our hearts become more open, allowing us to receive insights and truths that we might otherwise overlook. God's wisdom doesn't always come in a form we expect. We may think of wisdom as something grand, like a great revelation or a burst of inspiration. But often, it comes quietly, like a gentle breeze, offering peace and clarity in the midst of confusion. It might come through a moment of stillness when we finally feel peace about a decision that has been weighing on our hearts. Or it might appear in our reflections during a quiet prayer when we suddenly gain understanding about a situation or relationship. In these moments, silence becomes a conduit for divine wisdom, offering us the answers and guidance we seek. When we sit in silence, we allow our minds to calm and our hearts to open, making it easier for God's wisdom to flow into us. It's in these moments that we can reflect on our lives, our choices, and our purpose, and gain insights that might not be obvious in the busyness of daily life. Wisdom doesn't always need to be spoken aloud. Often, it's something we feel deep within us, an inner knowing that comes only when we allow ourselves to be still. In these moments of silence, God can help us gain perspective, shift our priorities, and realign our actions with His will. Silence teaches us to trust in His timing, to wait for His answers, and to believe that wisdom will come, even if it takes time. It is through silence that we often come to understand that we don't need all the answers at once, and that God's plan is unfolding perfectly, even if we can't always see it right away. The wisdom found in silence is a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand God's guidance is to stop seeking it in the noise and distractions around us. Instead, we can find it in the quiet moments, where God's truth has room to settle in our hearts and minds. God's presence is not confined to moments filled with loud voices or grand gestures. Often it is in the quietest spaces, the moments of stillness, where we can feel His presence most profoundly. When the world around us is silent, we open ourselves to a deeper connection with God, one that transcends the physical world and touches the very core of our spirit. In the absence of noise, God is still with us, offering comfort, strength, and peace, even when we can't see or hear Him in the traditional sense. Silence invites us to be present with God in a way that we may not experience in the busyness of our daily lives. It's easy to think that God is absent when we don't hear a loud, clear answer or feel His presence in the way we expect. But the truth is, God is always near. His presence isn't defined by sound or visible signs, but by the quiet assurance that He is with us, guiding and protecting us. When we allow ourselves to sit in silence, we create the space to feel His love and guidance more deeply. During moments of silence, many of us experience a sense of peace that we can't quite explain. It's a comfort that comes when we let go of our need to constantly fill the air with words and noise. In the quiet, we discover that God's presence is enough. It doesn't need to be loud or overwhelming. In fact, it is often in the most subtle and silent moments that we can feel God's comforting touch the most. It may come as a gentle reminder that He is with us, or as a deep sense of calm that washes over us, reassuring us that everything will be okay. The silence allows us to slow down and listen for God's presence in the deeper parts of our hearts. It's in these moments that we are most vulnerable and open to the Holy Spirit's work in our lives. Whether it's through a peaceful heart during a stressful time or a sudden clarity in the midst of confusion, God's presence is there, silently at work, guiding us with love and patience. So, when life gets overwhelming or when we feel alone, it's important to remember that God's presence doesn't disappear in the silence. It becomes more tangible, more intimate. In the quiet, God meets us where we are, providing the reassurance that we are never truly alone. Patience is an essential part of our faith journey, and waiting in silence is one of the most powerful ways we can practice it. In a world that values instant gratification and quick solutions, waiting can feel uncomfortable and uncertain. But God calls us to trust in His timing, to remain patient and calm, even when we don't have all the answers right away. The process of waiting on God, especially in moments of silence, teaches us to surrender our control and trust that He is at work in our lives, even when we can't see the immediate results. When we sit in silence and wait for God's guidance, we often experience a sense of peace that comes from knowing He has a plan for us. While the world may urge us to rush, to make decisions quickly, and to take immediate action, God's voice is often heard in the stillness and the spaces where we allow ourselves to simply be. Silence becomes an opportunity to practice faith, where we learn to trust that God's timing is perfect, even if it doesn't align with our own expectations. Waiting on God in silence can also help us gain perspective. It's easy to become frustrated or anxious when we feel like we're stuck, or when things aren't happening as quickly as we'd like. But silence allows us to shift our focus from our immediate desires to the bigger picture of God's plan for our life. During this time of waiting, God may reveal to us things we hadn't considered or prepare us for what's to come, allowing us to step forward with greater confidence and understanding. This waiting process is not passive. It's an act of trust in God's sovereignty and love. It's in these moments of silence that we learn to release our worries and surrender to God's will, knowing that He is preparing us for something greater than we can imagine. As we wait, we begin to realize that the silence itself is a gift, an opportunity to grow closer to God, to listen more intently, and to prepare ourselves for the next step in our journey. In the end, waiting on God in silence is not a sign of weakness or passivity, it's an act of profound strength. It's a reminder that we don't have to have all the answers or control every outcome. Instead, we can rest in the peace that comes from knowing God is with us, guiding us every step of the way, even in the quiet moments of waiting. Embracing silence has the power to transform our spiritual lives in ways we might not expect. It is in these moments of quiet that we encounter a deeper connection with God, one that goes beyond the surface and touches the core of who we are. Through silence, we are given the opportunity to open our hearts and minds to God's presence in a way that is often overshadowed by the noise of the world. This transformation isn't something that happens overnight, but rather through a continuous practice of sitting in the stillness, allowing God to reveal Himself to us in ways that words cannot fully capture. In the quiet, we begin to understand that God's messages don't always come in grand gestures or loud proclamations. Often, His presence is felt most deeply in the simple moments of peace and stillness. As we create space for these silent moments, we start to see how God is gently working in our lives, transforming our hearts and shaping our understanding of His will. This transformation is subtle but profound, as we learn to trust more fully in God's plan and find comfort in the knowledge that we are not walking this journey alone. The silence also invites us to reflect on our lives and our relationship with God. It gives us the time and space to evaluate where we've been, where we are, and where God is leading us. In these quiet moments, we may find clarity on areas of our lives that need change, healing, or growth. God uses silence as a tool to refine us, to help us see ourselves more clearly, and to guide us toward becoming the people He created us to be. Through the transformation that comes from embracing silence, we are also better able to hear God's voice in our daily lives. The more we practice listening in the quiet, the more attuned we become to His whispers in the midst of life's challenges. This ongoing transformation empowers us to face the trials of life with greater peace, knowing that God is guiding us every step of the way. Ultimately, silence doesn't just change us temporarily. It reshapes our hearts, minds, and spirits, drawing us closer to God. As we continue to seek His presence in the quiet, we experience a deeper sense of connection and transformation that impacts every area of our lives. Through these silent revelations, we grow in faith, understanding, and love, becoming more fully the people God has called us to be. In a world that constantly demands our attention, God gently invites us into silence, not to leave us in emptiness, but to fill us with His presence. Through silence, He speaks in ways that words cannot express. We learn to listen more deeply, to receive His wisdom, to feel His presence, and to grow in patience as we wait on His perfect timing. In the stillness, our faith is refined, our hearts are softened, and our understanding of His love becomes clearer. God's silence is never empty. It's rich with meaning, purpose, and direction. When we embrace it, we discover that it is not a break in communication, but a deeper form of it. It's in that quiet space that we are transformed, drawn closer to Him, and made ready for what He has prepared for us. So, the next time life feels quiet or uncertain, don't rush to fill the silence. Instead, sit in it. Lean into it. Trust that God is there, speaking not with noise but with power. Because sometimes what God says in the silence is exactly what your soul needs to hear.